Sikes and Nancy, Chapter 1. Fagin, the receiver of stolen goods, was up betimes one morning and waited impatiently for the appearance of his new associate, Noah Claypole, otherwise Morris Bolter, who at length presented himself and, cutting a monstrous slice of bread, commenced a voracious assault on the breakfast.
"Bolter! Bolter!"
"Well, here I am. What's the matter? Don't you ask me to do anything till I've done eating. Oh, that's a great fault in this place. You never get enough time over your meals."
"You can talk as you eat, can't you?"
"Oh, yes, I can talk. I get on better when I talk. Talk away. You won't interrupt me."
There seemed indeed no great fear of anything interrupting him, as he had evidently sat down with a determination to do a deal of business.
"I want you, Bolter,"
leaning over the table,
"to do a piece of work for me, my dear, that needs great care and caution."
"I say, don't you go shoving me into danger, you know. Oh, that don't suit me, that don't, and so I tell you."
"There's not the smallest danger in it, not the very smallest. It's only to dodge a woman."
"An old woman?"
"A young one."
"Oh, I can do that pretty well. I was a regular sneak when I was at school. What am I to dodge her for?"
Not to do anything, but tell me where she goes, who she sees, and if possible, what she says. To remember the street, if it is a street, or the house, if it is a house, and to bring me back all the information you can."
"What'll you give me?"
"If you do it well, £1, my dear, £1. And that's what I never gave yet for any job or work where there wasn't valuable consideration to be got."
"Who is she?"
"One of us."
"Oh, Lord. You're doubtful of her, are you?"
"She has found out some new friends, my dear, and I must know who they are."
"I see. I'm your man. Where is she? Where am I to wait for her? Where am I to go?"
"All that, my dear, you shall hear from me. I'll point her out at the proper time. Now you keep ready in the clothes I've got here for you, and leave the rest to me."
That night, and the next again, the spy sat, booted and equipped in the disguise of a carter, ready to turn out at a word from Fagin. 6 nights passed, and on each Fagin came home with a disappointed face and briefly intimated that it was not yet time. On the 7th he returned exultant. It was Sunday night.
"She goes abroad tonight," said Fagin, "and on the right errand, I'm sure, for she's been alone all day, and the man she's afraid of will not be back much before daybreak. Come with me, quick."
They left the house, and stealing through a labyrinth of streets, arrived at length before a public house. It was past 11 o'clock, and the door was closed, but it opened softly as Fagin gave a low whistle. They entered without noise.
Scarcely venturing to whisper, but substituting dumb show for words, Fagin pointed out a pane of glass high in the wall to Noah, and signed to him to climb up on a piece of furniture below it and observe the person in the adjoining room.
"Is that the woman?"
Fagin nodded. "Yes. I can't see her face well. She's looking down, and the candle is behind her. Stay there."
He signed to the lad, who had opened the house door to them, who withdrew, entered the room adjoining, and, under the pretence of snuffing the candle, moved it in the required position. Then he spoke to the girl, causing her to raise her face.
"I see her now. Plainly. I should know her among 1,000.
The spy descended. The room door opened, and the girl came out. Fagin drew him behind a small partition, and they held their breath as she passed within a few feet of their place of concealment, and emerged by the door at which they had entered.
"After her! To the left! Take the left hand, and keep on the other side! After her!"
The spy darted off, and by the light of the street lamp saw the girl's retreating figure already at some distance before him. He advanced as near as he considered prudent, and kept on the opposite side of the street. She looked nervously round. She seemed to gather courage as she advanced, and to walk with a steadier and firmer step. The spy preserved the same relative distance between them and followed. Chapter 2. The churches chimed 11:15 as the two figures emerged on London Bridge. The young woman advanced with a swift and rapid step and looked about her as though in quest of some expected object. The young man, who slunk along in the deepest shadows he could find and at some distance, accommodated his pace to hers, stopping when she stopped, and as she moved again, creeping stealthily on, but never allowing himself, in the ardour of his pursuit, to gain upon her. Thus they crossed the bridge from the Middlesex to the Surrey shore, when the woman, disappointed in her anxious scrutiny of the foot passengers, turned back. The movement was sudden, but the man was not thrown off his guard by it, for, shrinking into one of the recesses which surmounted the piers of the bridge, and leaning over the parapet the better to conceal his figure, he suffered her to pass. When she was about the same distance in advance as she had been before, he slipped quietly down and followed her again. At nearly the centre of the bridge she stopped. He stopped. It was a very dark night. The day had been unfavourable, and at that hour and place there were few people stirring. Such as there were hurried past, possibly without seeing, certainly without noticing, either the woman or the man. Their appearance was not attractive of such of London's destitute population as chanced to take their way over the bridge that night, and they stood there in silence, neither speaking nor spoken to. The girl had taken a few turns to and fro, closely watched by her hidden observer, when the heavy bell of St. Paul's tolled for the death of another day. Midnight had come upon the crowded city, upon the palace, the night cellar, the jail, the madhouse, the chambers of birth and death, of health and sickness, upon the rigid face of the corpse, and the calm sleep of the child. A young lady, accompanied by a grey-haired gentleman, alighted from a hackney carriage. They had scarcely set foot upon the pavement of the bridge when the girl started and joined them.
"Not here. I'm afraid to speak to you here. Come away. Out of the public road. Down the steps yonder."
The steps to which she pointed were those which, on the Surrey bank, and on the same side of the bridge as St. Saviour's Church, form a landing stairs from the river. To this spot the spy hastened unobserved, and after a moment's survey of the place he began to descend. These stairs are part of the bridge. They consist of 3 flights. Just below the end of the second, going down, the stone wall on the left terminates in an ornamental pilaster facing towards the Thames. At this point the lower steps widen, so that a person turning that angle of the wall is necessarily unseen by any others on the stairs who chance to be above, if only a step. The spy looked hastily round when he reached this point, and as there seemed no better place of concealment, and as the tide being out there was plenty of room, he slipped aside with his back to the pilaster and there waited, pretty certain that they would come no lower down. So tardily went the time in this lonely place, and so eager was the spy, that he was on the point of emerging from his hiding-place and regaining the road above, when he heard the sound of footsteps, and directly afterwards of voices almost close at his ear. He drew himself straight upright against the wall and listened attentively. "This is far enough," said a voice, which was evidently that of the gentleman. "I will not suffer the young lady to go any further. Many people would have distrusted you too much to come even so far, but you see I am willing to humour you."
"To humour me?" cried the voice of the girl whom he had followed. "You're considerate indeed, sir, to humour me. Well, it's no matter."
"Why, for what purpose can you have brought us to this strange place? Why not have let me speak to you above there, where there's light and there's something stirring, instead of bringing us to this dark and dismal hole?"
"I told you before that I was afraid to speak to you there. I don't know why it is. said the girl, shuddering, but I have such a fear and dread upon me tonight that I can hardly stand.
A fear of what?
I scarcely know of what. I wish I did. Horrible thoughts of death and shrouds with blood upon them, and a fear that has made me burn as if I was on fire have been with me all day. I was reading a book tonight to while the time away, and the same things came into the print.
Imagination?
No imagination. I swear I saw coffin written in every page of the book in large black letters. Aye, and they carried one close to me in the streets tonight.
Well, there's nothing unusual in that. They have passed me often.
Real ones? This was not.
Pray speak kindly to her, said the young lady to the grey-haired gentleman. Poor creature, she seems to need it.
Bless you, miss, for that. Your haughty religious people would have held their heads up to see me as I am tonight, and would have preached of flames and vengeance. Oh, dear lady, why aren't those who claim to be God's own folks as gentle and as kind to us poor wretches as you?
You were not here last Sunday night, girl, as you appointed.
I couldn't come. I was kept by force.
By whom?
Bill Sikes. Him that I told the young lady of before.
You were not suspected of holding any communication with anybody on the subject which has brought us here tonight, I hope.
No, replied the girl, shaking her head. It's not easy for me to leave him unless he knows why. I couldn't have seen the lady when I did, but that I gave him a drink of laudanum before I came away.
Did he awake before you returned?
No, and neither he nor any of them suspect me.
Good. Now listen to me. I am Mr. Brownlow, this young lady's friend. I wish you, in this young lady's interest and for her sake, to deliver up Fagin.
Fagin? I will not do it. I will never do it. Devil that he is, and worse than devil as he has been to me as my teacher in all devilry, I will never do it.
Why?
For the reason that, bad life as he has led, I have led a bad life too. For the reason that there are many of us who have kept the same courses together, and I'll not turn upon them who might, any of them, have turned upon me, but didn't, bad as they are. Last, for the reason... Oh, how can I say this with the young lady here? That among them there is one, this Bill, this Sikes, the most desperate of all, that I can't leave. Whether it's God's wrath for the wrong I've done, I don't know, but I'm drawn back to him through everything. And I should be, I believe, if I knew that I was to die by his hand.
But put one man, not him, not one of the gang, the one-man monks into my hands, and leave him to me to deal with.
What if he turns against the others?
I promise you that, in that case, there the matter shall rest. They shall go scot-free.
Have I the lady's promise for that?
You have, replied Rose Maylie, the young lady.
I've been a liar, and among liars from a little child, but I will take your words.
After receiving an assurance from both that she might safely do so, she proceeded in a voice so low that it was often difficult for the listener to discover even the purport of what she said, to describe the means by which this one-man monks might be found and taken. But nothing would have induced her to compromise one of her own companions, little reason though she had, poor wretch, to spare them.
Now, said the gentleman, when she had finished, you have given us most valuable assistance, young woman, and I wish you to be the better for it. What can I do to serve you?
Nothing.
You will not persist in saying that. Think now. Take time. Tell me.
Nothing, sir. You can do nothing to help me. I'm past all hope.
You put yourself beyond the pale of hope. The past has been a dreary waste with you of useful energies misspent, and such treasures lavished as the Creator bestows but once and never grants again. But for the future you may hope. I do not say that it is in our power to offer you peace of heart and mind, for that must come as you seek it.
but quiet asylum, either in England or, if you fear to remain here, in some foreign country. It is not only within the compass of our ability, but our most anxious wish to secure you. Before the dawn of morning, before this river wakes to the first glimpse of daylight, you shall be placed as entirely beyond the reach of your former associates and leave as complete an absence of all trace behind you as if you were to disappear from the earth this moment. Come, I would not have you go back to exchange one word with any old companion, or take one look at any old haunt. Quit them all while there is time and opportunity.
She will be persuaded now, said the young lady.
No, sir. No, miss. I am chained to my old life. I loathe and hate it, but I cannot leave it. When ladies as young and good, as happy and beautiful as you, miss, give away your hearts, love will carry even you all lengths. When such as I, who have no certain roof but the coffin lid, and no friend in sickness or death but the hospital nurse, set our rotten hearts on any man, who can hope to cure us? This fear comes over me again. I must go home. Let us part. I shall be watched or seen. Go! Go! If I've done you any service, all I ask is leave me, and let me go my way alone.
Take this purse, cried the young lady. Take it for my sake, that you may have some resource in any hour of need and trouble.
No, I've not done this for money. Let me have that to think of. And yet, give me something that you have worn. I should like to have something. No, not a ring. They'd rob me of that. Your gloves or handkerchief. Anything that I can keep as having belonged to you. There. Bless you. God bless you. Good night. Good night.
The agitation of the girl and the apprehension of some discovery which would subject her to violence seemed to determine the gentleman to leave her. The sound of retreating footsteps followed, and the voices ceased. After a time, Nancy ascended to the street. The spy remained on his post for some minutes, and then, after peeping out, to make sure he was unobserved, darted away and made for Fagin's house as fast as his legs would carry him. Chapter 3. It was nearly 2 hours before daybreak, that time which in the autumn of the year may be truly called the dead of night, when the streets are silent and deserted, when even sound appears to slumber, and profligacy and riot have staggered home to dream. It was at this still and silent hour that Fagin sat in his own lair. Stretched upon a mattress on the floor lay Noah Claypole, otherwise Morris Bolter, fast asleep. Towards him the old man sometimes directed his eyes for an instant, and then brought them back again to the wasting candle. He sat, without changing his attitude, or appearing to take the smallest heed of time, until the door-bell rang. He crept upstairs, and presently returned, accompanied by a man muffled to the chin, who carried a bundle under one arm. Throwing back his outer coat, the man displayed the burly frame of Sikes, the housebreaker. "There," laying the bundle on the table, "take care of that, and do the most you can with it. It's been trouble enough to get. I should have been here 3 hours ago." Fagin laid his hand upon the bundle and locked it in the cupboard, but he did not take his eyes off the robber for an instant. "What now?" cried Sikes. "What do you look at a man like that for?" Fagin raised his right hand and shook his trembling forefinger in the air. "Hullo," feeling in his breast pocket for his pistol. "He's gone mad. I must look to myself here."
No, it's not. You're not the person, Bill. I've no fault to find with you.
Oh, you haven't you?
Passing the pistol into a more convenient pocket.
That's lucky for one of us. Which one that is don't matter.
I've got that to tell you, Bill, will make you worse than me.
I? Tell away. Look sharp, or Nance will think I'm lost.
Lost? She's pretty well settled that in her own mind already.
He looked perplexed into the old man's face, and reading no satisfactory explanation of the riddle there, clenched his coat collar in his huge hand and shook him soundly.
Speak, will you? Or if you don't, it shall be for want of breath. Open your mouth and say what you got to say. Out with it, you thundering, blundering, wandering old cur. Out with it.
Suppose that lad that's lying there...
Fagin began. Sikes turned round to where Noah was sleeping, as if he had not previously observed him.
Well?
Suppose that lad was to preach, to blow upon us all. Suppose that lad was to do it of his own fancy, not grabbed, tried, earwigged by the parson and brought to it on bread and water, but of his own fancy, to please his own taste. Stealing out at nights to do it, you hear me? Suppose he did all this, what then?
What then? If he was left alive till I came, I'd grind his skull under the iron heel of my boot into as many grains as there are hairs upon his head.
What if I did it? I that know so much and could hang so many besides myself.
I dunno. I'd do something in that jail that'd get me put in irons, and if I was tried along with you, I'd fall upon you with them in the open court and beat out your brains afore the people. I'd smash your head as if a loaded wagon had gone over it.
Fagin looked hard at the robber and motioned him to be silent, stooped over the bed upon the floor, and shook the sleeper to rouse him.
Bolter! Bolter!
Poor lad, said Fagin, looking up with an expression of devilish anticipation and speaking slowly and with marked emphasis.
He's tired with watching for her so long. Watching for her, Bill.
What you mean?
Fagin made no answer, but bending over the sleeper again, hauled him into a sitting posture. When his assumed name had been repeated several times, Noah rubbed his eyes and, giving a heavy yawn, looked sleepily about him.
Tell me that again, once again, just for him to hear,
said the Jew, pointing to Sikes as he spoke. Tell you what, asked the sleeping Noah, shaking himself pettishly.
That about Nancy. You followed her.
Yes.
To London Bridge.
Yes.
Where she met two people.
So she did.
A gentleman and a lady that she had gone to of her own accord before, and asked her to give up all her pals and monks first, which she did. And to describe him, which she did, and to tell what house it was that we meet at and go to, which she did, and where it could be best watched from, which she did, and what time the people went there, which she did. She did all this. She told it all, every word, without a threat, without a murmur. She did she not?
All right, replied Noah, scratching his head. That's just what it was.
What did they say about last Sunday?
About last Sunday? Why, I told you that before.
Again? Tell it again.
Well, they asked her, as he grew more wakeful and seemed to have a dawning perception who Sikes was, they asked her why she didn't come last Sunday, as she promised. She said she couldn't.
Why? Tell him that.
Because she was forcibly kept at home by Bill Sikes, the man she had told him of before.
What more of him? What more of Bill Sikes, the man she had told them of before? Tell him that. Tell him that.
Why, that she couldn't very easily get out of doors unless he knew where she was going to. And so, for the first time, when she went to see the lady, she'd... It made me laugh when she said it, that did. She gave him a drink of laudanum.
Sikes rushed from the room and darted up the stairs.
Bill! Bill!
Cried Fagin, following him hastily.
A word! Only a word. Let me out. Don't speak to me. It's not safe. Let me out. Hear me speak a word, rejoined Fagin, laying his hand upon the lock. You won't be violent, Bill?
The day was breaking, and there was light enough for the men to see each other's faces. They exchanged a brief glance. There was the same fire in the eyes of both.
I mean, not too violent for safety. Be crafty, Bill, but not too bold.
The robber dashed into the silent streets. Without one pause or moment's consideration, without once turning his head to the right or left, without once raising his eyes to the sky or lowering them to the ground, but looking straight before him with savage resolution, he muttered not a word nor relaxed a muscle until he reached his own house door. He opened it softly with a key, strode lightly up the stairs, and entering his own room, double-locked the door and drew back the curtain of the bed. The girl was lying half-dressed upon the bed. He had roused her from her sleep, for she raised herself with a hurried and startled look.
Get up.
It is you, Bill.
Get up.
There was a candle burning, but he drew it from the candlestick and hurled it under the grate. Seeing the faint light of early day without, the girl rose to undraw the curtain.
Let it be. There's light enough for what I've got to do.
Bill, why'd you look like that at me?
The robber regarded her for a few seconds with dilated nostrils and heaving breast, then, grasping her by the head and throat, dragged her into the middle of the room and placed his heavy hand upon her mouth.
You were watched tonight, you she-devil. Every word you said was heard.
Then if every word I said was heard, it was heard that I spared you, Bill. Dear Bill, you cannot have the heart to kill me. Oh, think of all I've given up only this one night for you, Bill. Bill, for dear God's sake, for your own, for mine, stop before you spill my blood. I have been true to you, upon my guilty soul I have. The gentleman and that dear lady tell me tonight of a home in some foreign country where I could end my days in solitude and peace. Let me see them again and beg them on my knees to show the same mercy to you. And let us both leave this dreadful place and far apart lead better lives and forget how we have lived, except in prayers, and never see each other more. It's never too late to repent. They told me so. I feel it now, but we must have time. We must have a little time.
The housebreaker freed one arm and grasped his pistol. The certainty of immediate detection if he fired flashed across his mind, and he beat it twice upon the upturned face that almost touched his own. She staggered and fell, but raising herself on her knees, she drew from her bosom a white handkerchief, rose Maylies, and holding it up towards heaven, breathed one prayer for mercy to her Maker. It was a ghastly figure to look upon. The murderer staggered backward to the wall, and shutting out the sight with his hand, seized a heavy club and struck her down. The bright sun burst upon the crowded city in clear and radiant glory. Through costly coloured glass and paper-mended window, through cathedral dome and rotten crevice, it shed its equal ray. It lighted up the room where the murdered woman lay. It did. He tried to shut it out, but it would stream in. If the sight had been a ghastly one in the dull morning, what was it now in all that brilliant light? He had not moved. He had been afraid to stir. There had been a moan and motion of the hand, and with terror added to rage, he had struck and struck again. Once he threw a rug over it, but it was worse to fancy the eyes and imagine them moving towards him than to see them glaring upward, as if watching the reflection of the pool of gore that quivered and danced in the sunlight on the ceiling. He had plucked it off again, and there was the body, mere flesh and blood, no more, but such flesh and so much blood. He struck a light, kindled a fire, and thrust the club into it. There was hair upon the end, which shrunk into a light cinder and whirled up the chimney. Even that frightened him, but he held the weapon till it broke, and then piled it on the coals to burn away and smoulder into ashes. He washed himself and rubbed his clothes. There were spots upon them that would not be removed, but he cut the pieces out and burnt them. How those stains were dispersed about the room! The very feet of his dog were bloody. All this time he had never once turned his back upon the corpse. He now moved backward towards the door, dragging the dog with him, shut the door softly, locked it, took the key, and left the house. As he gradually left the town behind him all that day and plunged that night into the solitude and darkness of the country, he was haunted by that ghastly figure following at his heels. He could hear its garments rustle in the leaves, and every breath of wind came laden with that last low cry. If he stopped, it stopped. If he ran, it followed. Not running, too, that would have been a relief, but borne on one slow, melancholy air that never rose or fell. At times he turned to beat this phantom off, though it should look him dead. But the hair rose on his head, and his blood stood still, for it had turned with him and was behind him then. He leaned his back against a bank, and felt that it stood above him, visibly out against the cold night sky. He threw himself on his back upon the road. At his head it stood, silent, erect, and still, a human gravestone with its epitaph in blood. Suddenly, towards daybreak, he took the desperate resolution of going back to London.
Is somebody to speak to there, at all events? A hiding place, too, in our gang's old house in Jacob's Island. I'll risk it.
Choosing the least frequented roads for his journey back, he resolved to lie concealed within a short distance of the city until it was dark night again, and then proceed to his destination. He did this, and limped in among 3 affrighted fellow thieves, the ghost of himself, blanched face, sunken eyes, hollow cheeks. His dog at his heels, covered with mud, lame, half-blind, crawling as if those stains had poisoned him. All 3 men shrank away, not one of them spake.
You that keep this house, do you mean to sell me, or to let me lie here till the hunt is over?
You may stop if you think it's safe. But what man ever escaped the men who are after you? Hark! A great sound coming on, like a rushing fire. What? Tracked so soon? The hunt was up already? Lights gleaming below, voices in loud and earnest talk, hurried tramp of steps on the wooden bridges over Folly Ditch, a beating on the heavy door and window shutters of the house, a waving crowd in the outer darkness like a field of corn moved by an angry storm.
The tide was in as I come up. Give me a rope. I may drop from the top of the house at the back into the folly ditch and clear off that way, or be stifled. Give me a rope.
No one stirred. They pointed to where they kept such things, and the murderer hurried with a strung cord to the housetop. Of all the terrific yells that ever fell on mortal ears, none could exceed the furious cry when he was seen. Some shouted to those who were nearest to set the house on fire. Others adjured the officers to shoot him dead. Others with execrations clutched and tore at him in the empty air. Some called for ladders, some for sledgehammers. Some ran with torches to and fro to seek them. "I promise £50," cried Mr. Brownlow from the nearest bridge, "to the man who takes that murderer alive." Sikes set his foot against a stack of chimneys, fastened one end of the rope firmly round it, and with the other made a strong running noose by the aid of his hands and teeth. With a cord round his back, he could let himself down to within a less distance of the ground than his own height, and he had his knife ready in his hand to cut the cord and drop. At the instant that he brought the loop over his head before slipping it beneath his armpits, looking behind him on the roof, he threw up his arms and yelled, "The eyes again!" Staggering, as if struck by lightning, he lost his balance and tumbled over the parapet. The noose was at his neck. It ran up with his weight, tight as a bowstring and swift as the arrow it speeds. He fell 35 feet and hung with his open knife clenched in his stiffening hand. The dog, which had lain concealed till now, ran backwards and forwards on the parapet with a dismal howl, and collecting himself for a spring, jumped for the dead man's shoulders. Missing his aim, he fell into the ditch, turning over as he went, and striking against a stone, dashed out his brains.